Where's
All
their
right.
hat?
Hi, everybody. My name's Joel Kaplan. I am the Associate Dean for our professional graduate programs, of which we have a dozen. And we've decided to break up kind of our previews. We normally do it all in person, and I wish we could do it all in person again this year, but next year in Syracuse, we're hoping. So we're breaking them up into three, and this is the journalism group. And it's my favorite group, mainly because I'm a journalist. So go journalism, capital J. So we have, actually we have 4 journalism programs, but we have 3 here. And you're gonna wave and then I'll ask a question. We have Eric Rohde. Wave, Eric. Eric is the director of our Goldring Arts Journalism and Communications program. And then we have Melissa Cheshire. Wave, Melissa. She is the director of our magazine, news, and digital journalism graduate program. And I'm a member of her department, so I always have to be nice to her. And then we have Chris Toohey. Wave, Chris. He is the director, former news director in television, but now the director of and chair of our broadcast and digital journalism program. Our 4th program is actually multimedia photo and design, which has many photojournalists in it. Unfortunately, Bruce Strong, who's the director, he has a class right now, so he can't be here. But if you're interested in photojournalism, stick around because we can help you out and the like. I'm going to ask for the first half hour, I'm going to talk to our program directors. And if you have a general question for all of them, that's great. Put it in, you want them in the chat, Martha? Yeah, put your questions in the chat and we'll try to get to it. But I'll ask them for the first half hour, and then the second half hour, we'll have breakout sessions for all 3 of them. And you can choose which breakout you want to go into, and you can go into more than one if you'd like. So the first question I just want to ask them so that you get a sense of who we are and what we are is for each of the programs to go through from soup to nuts what the program's all about. As you know, all of our programs, our professional programs, are 1-year wraparound programs. So they start generally around July 1st, and most of them end around the end of June. Eric's program ends a little earlier because he's got a special thing at the end, and Chris goes 6 weeks more because the last 6 weeks are in Washington, D.C. But let's start, Eric, with you in the Arts Journalism program and talk about boot camp all the way through the end.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Joel. So our program really starts at the beginning of July and ends in early to mid-June. It's a little shorter, as Joel said, than some of them, for the reason we'll talk about at the capstone at the end. Like all the grad programs, you begin with a 6-week intensive. We talk about changing the name from boot camp because it scares people. I think it's not the worst thing to scare people a little tiny bit, but it is a fairly intensive, spend the 6 weeks really honing the nuts and bolts of reporting in general. And then our program, which is relatively new compared to, we've been here about 15, 16 years now, is specifically geared toward people who want to think and write about the arts and culture. If you think that, as I do, that a society, you can learn a lot about a society by the stories it tells and the way that those stories are received and refuted and contextualized, that's what we do. So we spend a lot of time in boot camp working on the nuts and bolts reporting, and then also thinking about that through a cultural prism and how you write about specific arts organizations. This has obviously been very different this year, like everything, thinking how arts orgs that are barely staying afloat in a good normal time are dealing with what for like live performance really amounts to like an existential crisis of how to keep the lights on, how to think about a life, a progressively normal existence after this. And so the summer's given over to that. We travel a decent amount in the AJ, which, okay, this is worth mentioning. Up until recently, it's just been the arts journalism program. We've realized that a lot of our graduates have found really fulfilling work in the artistic spheres, but not reporting about it from without, but working in the publications department, marketing or PR departments of places like the Kennedy Center or Alvin Ailey Dance Company or the Apollo Theater or downtown theater companies in New York City. And so it's now the arts journalism and communications program. So I've also folded into the curriculum a bit of learning about writing about the arts from within an organization. And that comes into play a little bit in boot camp. Then the fall semester happens, which is a mix of electives and Gold Ring curriculum, core curriculum. Our first of 3 trips happen then. I'm really excited about our travel opportunities. We travel in the fall up to Toronto, which is where the Toronto Film Festival happens. It's one of the real blue chip festivals. Joel's been a bunch of times. You see all kinds of big, huge Oscar bait kind of things. And then you also see much more esoteric foreign films, documentaries, experimental film, midnight madness kind of stuff. Every night of the 10-day festival, there's crazy midnight stuff happening. And then because a lot of the film press is up there covering it, we'll try to make connections with some of the people who are there writing, and you get to spend a little time with them. After the fall semester, we kick up again the week before spring semester begins with a 6-day New York City immersion. The idea is that these 3 trips, each trip becomes slightly longer. So we're in Toronto for a weekend and we're writing about it, but writing about it just for classroom purposes. Each trip becomes a little bit longer and a little more ambitious, a little bit farther away, and with a little bit more to show for it. So when you get down to New York City, we go to Broadway shows and we go to MoMA and we go to the Philharmonic and we go to all these different cool things, and then meeting with workplaces along the way. It culminates with the workshops that we have with people who work in New York City. It could be Alex Ross, who's the classical music writer for the New Yorker. It could be editors at places, and they'll sit and work with with the work that you've done during that week, just to workshop it and develop it and to make those connections, which I think are important. So then the spring semester is another mix of curriculum and electives, and it culminates in, you'll hear about different capstones. All the Newhouse programs have fantastic capstones. I'm particularly fond of ours because this is a festival that's very near and dear to me. We travel down to Charleston, South Carolina, which is the home of the Spoleto Festival that goes on for 3 weekends and the days in between in late May to early June. And we essentially become the arts desk of the Charleston, the daily newspaper in Charleston, the Post and Courier, which is a Pulitzer Prize winning paper. And they bring us on to essentially become the arts desk covering the Spoleto Festival in all its variety. And it's a great place to see a wide array of film. Joel's been down there as well. Joel kind of tags along with a lot of our trips. And so we bring in a lot of interesting people. We've got some great faculty, as does every program here at Newhouse. So ours is a bit smaller, and it's very specifically tailored toward people who, if in your cohort, you're the one who still wants to talk about the Crown or talk about culture or the arts after your friends are ready to stop talking about that and start talking about something else, for at least 1 year, you will be around people who will not be sick of talking about that stuff. This is just what we do for the year. And I really love it. I love working with the students. And I hope to talk with some of you about it as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. That was perfect. Okay, in alphabetical order, now we'll go to broadcast and digital journalism and Professor Toohey.
Thank you, Joel. Hi, everyone. I'm, again, Chris Toohey. I'm the chair of the Broadcast and Digital Journalism Department. And we are the video storytellers by history, but multi-platform storytellers, nonfiction storytellers in today's modern world. And as requested, a quick trip through the curriculum. We too start and have a boot camp, as Eric pointed out. We try to do a few different things in our boot camp. People who come into the Broadcast Digital Journalism Master's Program tend to come from a variety of backgrounds. Some have a little bit of journalism experience, some have a little bit of communications experience, maybe an undergrad. Some have very little experience at all and are looking to make a career change. So what we're trying to do during the 6 weeks of boot camp is kind of level the playing field so that we have a handle on all the students' skills and what they're ready to absorb. So we focus on writing news for broadcast, writing news for online, writing news for social media, and as well as basic reporting skills how to interview people, how to go out, how to come up with story ideas, go out in the field, interview people that you need for your stories, come back, write the stories, and edit the stories together in an audio format. We focus primarily on audio during boot camp and not too much in video because you're going to get a whole lot of that later on. And some of the basics of what journalism is and what we're here for as well. As all the programs will attest, we're really big on writing well here at the Newhouse School. So that's a big chunk of what we're trying to do too during boot camp. Then in the fall, the heavy lifting really starts. You have a TV reporting class, TV/video reporting class that actually meets 3 times a week. It has a lot of heft to it because in a lot of ways, it's the most important class. You continue with lecture periods, learning more about journalism, how to write for broadcast, continuing how to write for other platforms, how to report using video, which means training you in using professional grade Canon field cameras. Our video editing platform of choice is Adobe Premiere, which is becoming one of the dominant platforms in broadcast news. Again, how do you develop story ideas? Who do you need to talk to? Now you've got to add the element of what are the pictures you need to shoot to tell your story. You go out in the field and you shoot your video and you do your interviews and you come back and you write the story and you voice the story and then you edit it all together. And this is all same day service. We basically own you from early morning until whatever the deadline is, 11 p.m. or so at night, because there's no point in trying to teach you how to do real journalism and not teaching you how to do it on a deadline. The greatest story in the world is of no use about 10 minutes after it was supposed to air and didn't make its slot. We also, so there's the lecture day, there's the story day, and then there's our live lab day where we focus on developing your performance skills as a live reporter. In other words, you arrive at the scene of a story, you get a set of facts, you make sense of them, you put them into notes, and you can turn and look at a camera and make sense of all the complex elements that may be going on at the story. Being able to do that is hugely important in today's 24/7 journalism world. Also in the fall, you'll take a class, either an applied research or a media law class, and then that flip-flops in the spring. Whichever one you didn't take, you then take in the spring. You will also take a 1-credit performance class to help you develop your vocal skills and presentation skills. And also included are 3 elective credits. These credits can be used in a variety of different ways, and I'll get into more of that in the breakout section. But suffice to say, there are a bunch of news electives you can do. For example, this past fall, Professor Kaplan taught a political reporting class that was open to BDG and MND students. Sports students, if they're interested in the sports track, will take most of their electives in sports related courses. So as we're speeding through this 13-month program, the spring semester brings with it another reporting class that is a little less day of news reporting, but a little bit more longer form style reporting, and also different ways of telling stories like explainer type stories that might be made up more of text and video and sound and not necessarily a reporter's voice track with that. As I said, if you took law, then you take research in the spring. If you took research, then you take law in the spring. Then you also have a critical perspectives class, which is an ethics class. And it's really boring because nothing important or ethically challenging ever happens in news. And so it's really kind of a waste of 2 credits. That's called sarcasm. There's always something crazy going on. And as you know, the news media, we are the enemy of the people. So there are a lot of ethical things that we need to talk about. Again, that's not true, but 3 more elective credits there. Again, I can talk more about those kinds of things in the breakout. Then in the first summer session in the second year is what we generally just refer to as the newscast class. That's where we use our great state-of-the-art facilities, newsroom and studio, to produce newscasts where everyone in the class rotates through all the different positions that exist in a contemporary broadcast newsroom: producers, reporters, anchors, sports, weather, social media editors, so on and so forth. And the point of that is, even if you've decided you don't want to be on camera, but you want to work behind the scenes as a producer, there's an element of walk a mile in the other person's shoes that goes on in that class. So you get a better sense of how all the pieces fit together. And then it all comes to a celebratory ending with our capstones. The Washington, D.C. capstone, for my money, is the cherry on top of our program. Students for 6 weeks who go to Washington. We set up shop down there in a newsroom. We actually rent space from George Washington University, so you can say you spent 6 weeks at GW if you want to. Students who want to be on air actually work as reporters in Washington for TV stations around the country. The idea is your work actually gets on air in various markets around the country, from Brownsville, Texas, to Salt Lake City, Fort Wayne, numerous other places. And then there are behind the scenes 6-week internships that also take place as part of the DC capstone. And if sports is your thing, we also work with the Nexstar Media Group, which owns more TV stations than God. And our students who are working as news reporters work with Nexstar. And we've started a new thing in the past few years where we partner with Nexstar covering NFL training camp. Nexstar conveniently has stations in NFL markets like Buffalo, Tampa Bay, Providence, which is part of the New England Patriots market, and so forth. So every student ends with a capstone, either in news or sports. And that's sort of my breathless walk through the 13 months of the BDJ program. It's pretty intense, and we keep you pretty busy. But I can guarantee you that if this is something you want to do for a living, you'll walk out on the back end of it very employable in the broadcast news industry.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Melissa, magazine news and online journalism, magazine news and digital journalism, whatever the name is this year.
Okay, since you're in the department, I would think that you would get the name right. Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Cheshire. I am the program director of the magazine news and digital journalism department. And I would say that what distinguishes this program from the two previous ones, which are also excellent, is that we are less defined by a particular industry and a particular beat. A few years ago, we had David Remnick, the editor of The New Yorker, come and speak to students. And the first question was, what does it take to write for The New Yorker? And he had a one-word answer, and that was curiosity. And what I'd like to say about the M&D program is that basically it's a Swiss Army knife where you can ground yourself in the basics of exceptional journalism and then build your career path based on what thing interests you most. And we give you a lot of opportunities to act on things that interest you, because usually people who are drawn to the M&D program are like writing is their passion. But oftentimes students come to the M&D program and fall in love with graphic design, with social media, with potentially working for a book publisher, for doing social media. And we even have alums who end up in broadcast. So how we engineer that is by, like the other two programs, beginning with a boot camp that grounds you in the basics of reporting and writing, ethics and diversity, along with multi-platform storytelling. Then we built on that in the fall with a series of requirements that I like to refer to as the spinach. So a lot of things that are good for you, and we save the desserts for the spring. But in the fall, you will take a research course, uh, typically driven by you understanding and acquiring the ability to tell stories with data. There is no job in journalism that isn't informed by that skill. So, and we are an accredited program, accredited school, which I think is an important distinction. You also have to take an editing class. You have to take an advanced reporting class. And that advanced reporting class allows you to identify a beat and begin writing more featurey type stories. And then you also have to take a multimedia storytelling for journalists that covers podcasting, that covers video, and that covers still photography. And then in the spring, the dessert semester, you only have one requirement, and that is law. And then you have three electives that you can spend in any way that you would like. We have an internship class, which allows you to work at a local media outlet and get clips and examples of your work. Some students dig deep in graphic design and multimedia storytelling. We have a critical writing course if you fall in love or also want to develop your arts journalism muscle in one class. Um, and I'm trying to think of some other popular electives, a lot of entrepreneurship courses. And the other feature of the spring is we have an everyone graduates with a website program that allows you, we give a series of workshops so that you graduate with a digital presence that signals to potential employers what you are good at and what you want to do. And we also have a mobile competition, and that competition informs the idea that we pursue in the capstone experience. So students work in teams, we have industry mentors, and we have a weekend where students pitch their ideas to three um, professionals from typically Condé Nast Hearst. We've had people from the Washington Post and BuzzFeed, and they identify a winner. That idea is what we pursue in the capstone, spending 6 weeks to create a digital launch of that idea. And if you come to the session, I will show you some past examples of those. And just finally, to answer the prompt that Professor Kaplan provided, I think our alumni go to all the places represented, or industries represented in our name. So we have people at the Washington Post, the Houston Chronicle. We have people at all kinds of different magazines, from Cosmo, Condé Nast Traveler, ESPN, Sports Illustrated, Mother Jones, National Geographic. And we even have people who end up on the broadcast side of things, Axios, MSNBC, along with ESPN. So that's us in a nutshell.
Thanks, Melissa. And just to follow up on that, Chris, can you just give maybe a handful, 5 or 6, of where your students have gone in the last year or two?
Sure. Well, it depends on exactly what they want to do. Our primary place where we feed people into our television stations and television networks, although students of ours oftentimes end up working at the video arm of an online presence or a newspaper as well. But we've had students from the past couple of years go to Denver as a producer. Some go to the networks in New York as associate producers and work their way up from there. Sports people go to work for ESPN or in a local station like Santa Barbara as a sports reporter. It's really all over the map. Producers can start in a little bit bigger cities and a little bit bigger markets. Reporters start in all size markets, large and small, some right here in Syracuse, some, I think Laredo, Texas, and Huntsville, Alabama, and you name it, and you can pretty much go to that market's TV news websites and look at the staff bios thing. You'll find some Newhouse people, I guarantee it.
Thanks, Chris. And Eric, about 5 or 6 of the locations of your students?
Sure. So like I mentioned, we have sort of these two, I don't call them tracks because you don't really specialize specifically in journalism or communications, but journalism, which has been our bread and butter for a long time. I mean, we have people at places like MTV News and Broadway.com and American Theater Magazine. A lot of people will end up at small, kind of like what Chris was saying. If you end up at a smaller regional newspaper, you're typically like the theater / dance / music / anything else reporter, just because that's how the newsrooms look these days. And so you're covering a lot, that's all breadth. Then you have people who are at like the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and he's the classical music writer. As you get into the bigger papers, they specialize a bit more. And so those are the ones on the journalism side. And then I think I mentioned places like the Kennedy Center, the Apollo Theater in Harlem, Alvin Ailey Dance Company, Aspen Music Festival in Colorado, people working for the organizations.
Great. So thanks, we're almost done with the half hour. I just want to mention the kind of the elephant in the room, or maybe it's the donkey in the room now, that COVID, right? So we were kind of fortunate at the Newhouse School. The boot camp was all virtual, and they could talk about how that went, because obviously when you're in broadcast journalism with hands-on, it's a big thing to try to figure out how to do that virtually. And the same, all 3 programs actually, but because it's so hands-on in boot camp. But we were lucky in the fall, we started a week early and we went up until like Thursday. And so we were able to, unlike many other schools who were online only, most of our grad students were able to come in and do all this stuff. And so that's good. And then we're knocking on wood that in the spring, we pushed that back to the end of January. We hope that will be the same. And we're hopeful that, there's 2 vaccines out there, that it won't impact you and that everything will be back to at least semi-normal. But I was also remiss to introduce Martha Coria up there. She's in charge of this whole thing. She's the assistant director of the grad programs. So her thing now, I'll leave it to her, but she's going to tell you how to go into the breakouts. You're not stuck if you get bored by Eric Rohde talking about classical music, then you can move on to Melissa, who will bore you talking about fashion. All right. Yeah, whatever. Then Chris can talk to you about sports. All right.
No boredom.
Yeah, no boredom. No, all 3 of them are brilliant. And the one thing that I always like to talk about is that we have the 2 greatest strengths of the Newhouse School is our faculty. And these 3 are amongst our top faculty members and our alums. And I can tell you about that too. The Newhouse Network is incredible, and they come back and they give back and all that. But I will stay in the main room here if you want to just talk to me. And meanwhile, you can go, like I said, back and forth. Martha, you want to tell them what they need to do?
Sure. So I just opened these breakout rooms. You should see an icon at the bottom that's just called breakout rooms. And if you click on that, you can actually see the 3 I've created, and you can actually just click to join. You have the ability to join and then return to the main room. Or if you want to join another, that's certainly possible. So you can go ahead and do that now. And we're allotting the last 30 minutes of the session for that. Dean Kaplan, do you think we need to return as a group for anything, or?
I don't think so, but I'll stick around a little longer than a half an hour. So if you have any specific questions for me, I'll just be here.
Yeah, I'll be here too if there's logistical questions, admissions questions, things like that. Okay. So select away.